English rugby is in crisis, not a quiet, manageable kind of crisis that gets smoothed over with a press release and a few coaching changes. It's a deep, structural, identity-level crisis that's now playing out in full view of the world every time Steve Borthwick's men pull on the white jersey. And now, one of the most respected and outspoken voices in the global game has stepped forward with a verdict that's as uncomfortable as it is hard to dismiss. Bob Skinstad, the former Springbok captain, is saying out loud what many inside the sport have been whispering behind closed doors for years. English rugby, he argues, has engineered a system so stripped of consequence, so insulated from the kind of pressure that forges elite competitors, that it's no longer producing players capable of delivering at the highest level when it truly matters. And his warning is one that England's administrators, coaches, and power brokers would be very unwise to ignore. Before we go any further into this story, if you're new to this channel, welcome to Genius One, your #1 destination for rugby analysis, breaking news, and everything happening in the world of sport. Hit that subscribe button right now and make sure you smash that like button so we can keep delivering content like this directly to you. If you've been riding with us from the beginning, you already know what this channel is about. Now, let's get deep into one of the most important conversations happening in rugby right now. The controversy at the center of this entire debate is the Gallagher Premiership's decision to scrap promotion and relegation entirely and transform England's elite domestic competition into a closed franchise model. This isn't a small administrative tweak, this is a fundamental philosophical shift in what the league is and what it stands for. And the timing of it, when you line it up against England's results at international level, makes for genuinely alarming reading. No club has been relegated from the Premiership since 2020, and here's the number that should stop every English rugby supporter in their tracks. That year, 2020, was the last time England won the Six Nations. Let that sink in for a moment. In the years since jeopardy disappeared from the domestic league, England's international form has collapsed in ways that felt unthinkable for the nation with the most financial resources in world rugby. They've lost 16 of their 36 Six Nations matches in that period. They've lost to Italy for the first time in history. They've lost to Fiji for the first time in history. They've suffered record home defeats against Ireland and France. They've been beaten by Scotland 5 times out of 6 encounters. And in that same window, not a single English club has managed to win the Champions Cup, despite the fact that English clubs lifted 4 of the 5 Champions Cup titles in the years immediately before relegation vanished from the competition. A Rugby Football Union review is now underway to try to understand what went so catastrophically wrong in England's worst-ever Six Nations campaign. They lost 4 games for the first time since 1976. They conceded more tries and more points than in any championship in their entire history. The questions being asked inside that review room are serious ones, but Bob Skinstad believes the root cause isn't buried in some complicated tactical analysis. He believes the answer has been hiding in plain sight all along. Speaking exclusively to Planet Rugby, Skinstad laid it out in terms every rugby player will immediately recognize and understand. He said, "As players, we are competitive animals. We are built to understand debilitating loss and mountain-high expectations of ourselves. If you're happy to play in the bland marshmallow land that is neither a promotion nor a relegation environment, why would you suddenly be a sharpened tool in a test match environment?" Read that again slowly. The bland marshmallow land. That's a phrase that should echo around every boardroom and every coaching box in English rugby. This isn't some outside observer throwing stones. This is a man who captained the Springboks, who understands what it takes to compete at the absolute summit of this sport, and who now owns a club battling relegation in the French second division, where the pressure of consequence is as real and as brutal as it has ever been. Skinstad went further. He said there is absolutely no jeopardy in the players' lives beneath test level. They go back to their clubs, and even if they lose every single game, they stay in the Premiership. You do not have to put your livelihood on the line. You do not have to stay at the top of your game the way players do in France. He called that extraordinary. And when you hold that observation up against England's results over the last 5 years, it's genuinely difficult to argue against him. Now, to be fair, the financial case for the closed franchise model isn't built on nothing. The numbers behind this decision are stark, and they deserve to be acknowledged. In the 2023-24 season, Premiership clubs posted a combined loss of $34 million. Total debt across the league climbed to $342 million. 6 of the 10 clubs were balance sheet insolvent. The owners and executives who voted for this change weren't acting out of arrogance or indifference to sporting values. They were staring down the barrel of an existential threat to professional rugby in England. After the devastating collapses of Worcester Warriors, Wasps, and London Irish, the fear of further casualties wasn't hypothetical. It was immediate and it was real. Former England captain Chris Rassie, who led both Harlequins and the national side, captured the impossible position the sport finds itself in with brutal honesty. He acknowledged that if relegation existed, it would absolutely force clubs in free fall to focus their minds and raise their game. It would put that edge back in the environment. But he also understood why it's gone. He said it's less a case of what the league wants than what it needs. English rugby simply cannot afford the financial uncertainty that relegation brings after Worcester, Wasps, and London Irish. Nobody wants to watch more clubs fold and more jobs disappear. Financial survival had to be priority. That's a serious argument, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. But here's where the situation becomes truly uncomfortable for English rugby. Even if you accept that the financial emergency justified the structural change, the sporting consequences are now accumulating in ways that can no longer be waved away. Simon Holliday, former England centre and now strategic advisor for Ealing Trailfinders, offered a perspective that cuts right to the heart of the problem. Ealing are leading the championship, England's second division, by 25 points. They've won every single game they've played this season. By any measure of sporting merit, they belong in the top flight. But there is no promotion. The door is closed. All that excellence, all those victories, all that competitive hunger, and there's nowhere for it to go. Holliday looked across at the Premiership and described what he saw with uncomfortable clarity. He said, there are streams of matches that simply do not matter anymore. A third of the division has nothing to play for. He pointed specifically to England centre Seb Atkinson, currently at Gloucester, and said that Atkinson isn't going to become a better player by turning out in matches that carry no weight, no tension, and no consequence for the next 2 months. There's no pressure forging him. There's no fire sharpening his edge. And England needs that edge when they face the Springboks at Ellis Park this summer. Gloucester sit 8th out of 10 in the Premiership table, 29 points adrift of the playoff positions, having won just twice in 12 league outings. Harlequins have endured an equally poor season, and yet neither club faces any threat to their status. Rassie, who knows the Quins' environment intimately, admitted directly that a relegation battle would force those players to find something extra. It would demand more. But in the current structure, that demand simply does not exist. Skinstad's final verdict on the entire situation was delivered without hesitation. He said the Premiership has failed domestic rugby with this decision. He doesn't agree with it, and he believes England may live to regret it. That's a damning conclusion from a man who has no axe to grind, no personal stake in English rugby's internal politics. He's simply calling it what he sees from the outside. Holliday's warning about the immediate future is equally sobering. He pointed to England's summer test schedule, starting with the test against South Africa at Ellis Park, followed by matches against Fiji and Argentina, and said that England could find themselves as low as 8th in the world rankings by the end of that tour, if results go against them. 8th in the world for a nation that commands the largest rugby budget on the planet. That would be a number that demands a reckoning, not just a review. Nobody in world rugby actually wants England to fail. A weak England is bad for the Six Nations, bad for the British and Irish Lions, bad for the commercial health of the global game. The sport needs a strong England at the table. But if the closed franchise model is gradually producing a generation of players who arrive at international level without the psychological hardness, the survival instinct, and the competitive desperation that only real consequence can carve into you, then English rugby may have bought its clubs a financial lifeline at an extraordinary cost.